Hey, welcome to another Tips for the Trade podcast, where we look into ways to make your business more efficient and run easier. I'm your host, Jeremy Lowe, and I'm the Senior Director of Content and Training at the Service Fusion Business Academy and an Associate Trainer at Service Nation. And I try to bring my 40 years of experience plus everything I've learned from contractors I've dealt with as a trainer and consultant to you in your homes and businesses. Today I want to talk about a trait that many business owners have and don't even realize it. We go to great extents to see that our customers are satisfied. And sometimes to do that, we have to manage every single aspect of a job, or so it appears. What I want to talk to you about today is why micromanaging is so dangerous to building a great company culture. It can damage both you and your employees and their productivity. So we'll talk about why some of us become micromanagers and then how to break that tendency. And what we should become is a macro manager. And don't worry, I'll talk about defining that a little later. But let's start first by defining what a micromanager is. Micromanaging is trying to control every part of a project or job, no matter how small or large it is. Here's some signs you might just be a micromanager. If every task done in your company has to have your stamp of approval. If you ask to be copied on all emails and correspondence leaving the building. If you're obsessed about getting constant updates on a project and will call and frequently ask for updates even if regularly volunteered. If you take over a project from others because you know you can do it right or quicker rather than taking the time to teach your employees how to do the job better themselves. If you perhaps don't feel that anyone else is as capable as you are in completing a project, you might just have a tendency to be a micromanager. If you overcomplicate instructions and you're trying to provide instructions for like every possible scenario, instead of letting an employee learn by doing and further develop their own skills, you're definitely a micromanager. If you find it simply very, very hard to let loose of a project, no matter how small it is, and delegate it to others, you're definitely a micromanager. If you have to hover over the shoulder of an employee after you've given them a task to see that they're doing it right, and it's not an issue of the employee's poorly trained, it's just you want to make sure it's done your way, you might be a micromanager. And finally, if you can't see the wood through the trees, so to speak, or you hyperfixate on the details rather than the broader picture or broader project, you might be a micromanager. So honestly ask yourself, do any of these fit you? Might you just be a micromanager? It's very hard when we're the owner or manager of a company to let loose of a project. But inherently, we all understand that learning to delegate is an important part of becoming an effective leader and being able to better organize our own time. After all, no matter how good we are at doing something, we can't do everything. That's why we have employees. So to be a great leader and an outstanding manager, we have to learn how to leverage our staff to balance workloads and efficiently complete projects by trusting other people to get it done. Why is it then, if we know we need to delegate, it's so hard for some of us to let go and entrust others to do tasks we think we need to do because we either want it done better, faster, or to a higher standard than we think our employee will do? There's several reasons, if we're completely honest with ourselves, why delegation can be so hard. And I want to look at these root issues and see if there's things that we can do to change being a micromanager. The first step in reducing our micromanaging behavior is almost like being an alcoholic, admitting there's a problem. It requires some frank self-examination and execution of emotional intelligence coupled with a strong desire to make changes for the betterment of ourselves, our employees, and our company if we realize that we have micromanaging tendencies. The next step, once we understand that it's a problem, is letting go of control. I'm reminded of a saying that I was taught as a salesperson years ago about giving options. Those who give up control are most in control. So if you give someone the opportunity to choose their own path by options, you're giving up control, but you're still controlling the situation by providing only specific options. The point is, micromanagers have a hard time giving up control. We want to see that everything is done just the way we want. But you know what? At some point, if you're going to grow your organization, you're going to have to learn to trust your employees and empower them to do their jobs without you leaning over their shoulders all the time. You need to set clear expectations of what you expect, and then, hey, step back, hand over the control of the work to them. Think of it this way. If you continue to micromanage and dictate every step an employee must take and how they must act to complete their job or project, you're going to end up with the project probably getting done, but also with a staff of automatons who can't think for themselves and can't adapt as a circumstance changes. And that means they're going to always be running back to you looking for an answer, and you're stuck making all the decisions. Now, that might be enticing if you like control, but really, as a manager, it makes you much less effective, because you're becoming bogged down in the minutia of the daily projects or tasks rather than effectively managing the bigger project or the bigger goals of you and your organization. Another way to reduce micromanaging is to understand communication. Do you communicate the bigger goal or the smaller steps of a project? You see, micromanagers get lost in the weeds of detail. We need to learn to communicate the big picture. Make sure your team understands the largest priorities and let them make decisions towards how they can meet those objectives. I want to ask you this question, really. If the objectives are being met, if the project is getting done in a timely and correct manner, maybe not to exactly what you want, but correct as far as the customer is concerned, do you really need to dictate every aspect of how your staff goes about doing their job to meet the objective you've given them? Of course not. Try asking your staff questions that make them think about how to do something rather than always telling them how to do it. Ask things like, what do you need from me to help you get your job done? Or, how are you going to approach this? Or, explain to me the steps you think you're going to take to get this done. Or perhaps, what challenges do you think you might face in getting this done? What you're doing is you're demonstrating interest and concern, but you're not smothering their creativity by trying to take over. You're effectively saying to your employee, look, I trust you. I want you to think, I want you to learn, follow the logic that I run my organization by and my project by, but you don't have to do it step by step exactly the way I do, as long as you accomplish the same end results. We want our employees to be independent and have a level of autonomy that allows them to enjoy their job and not feel like they're stuck in the rut of rules and regulations. You know what a rut is? A rut is simply nothing more than a grave that both ends have been knocked out of. It's very hard for an employee to climb out of the rut of perpetual boredom in a job, or feeling like they're just a cog in the wheel when they can't think for themselves. And if you're micromanaging every aspect of what they do, they can't think for themselves. And you know what? They're never going to learn how to think for themselves. You should make your team focus on reaching agreed upon checkpoints and milestones, rather than every little thing in the day-to-day project. Agree that you'll check in at a specific milestone or a specific deliverable, rather than requiring constant daily updates or even perhaps hourly updates. Now, this is a hard thing. Giving up control like that takes a lot of effort. But as you do that, you will see your employees begin to work better, begin to become more effective, begin to want to communicate to you more about what is happening with the project as they take a pride of ownership, as they want to go to you and say, look, boss, you gave me this and see what I did with it. Give positive feedback when that happens, when you see independent progress. If you see your team moving in the right direction without you having to have your hand on their back, praise that, not just to the teammate, but openly to the entire company. Who of us doesn't like a good pat on the back? Positive reinforcement builds confidence in employees, which in turn fuels their desire to meet future objectives and deadlines for more positive feedback. It's a gratification loop. It's kind of like the mouse that they put cheese in a little drawer, and if he pressed the button or the lever, he was rewarded with the cheese. The more cheese he got, the more he pressed the lever. Now, I'm not calling your employees mice, don't get me wrong. All I'm saying is, if I do good, I get rewarded and recognized. And that makes me want to do better, so again, I get rewarded and recognized. Also, as a manager, remember, you have to model the behavior you want to see in your employees. Don't hover over your team and then expect them to operate independently and not hover over their subordinates. Demonstrate empowerment through your own actions. Give tasks and give responsibilities and step back. Be patient. Listen, from a former micromanager, I can tell you it takes time to break a habit of micromanaging and doing everything yourself or having to know everything that's going on. You've got to catch yourself when you find you're reverting back to hovering and dictating every detail, and conscientiously pull back, giving your team the ability to act autonomously. If you do that and you're consistent in allowing more and more autonomy, you're going to get better and better results, which I know, believe me, I know this, it sounds contrary. Wait, if I let them do what they want, I'm going to get better results? The answer to that is yes, as long as you have clear goals and clear milestones to accomplish. The most important mindset shift you can have is to value the outcome more than the control over the process or how you got to the outcome. It's going to feel uncomfortable, but letting go allows your team to step up in responsibility and builds a much healthier work culture as people take that pride of ownership. You'll find that by taking those steps of letting your team be empowered, of not hovering, of not dictating every detail, but thinking in goals and milestones and the bigger picture, you're going to have happier employees, and you're going to be able to shift from being a micromanager to what you want to be, a macro manager. Okay, what does it mean to be a macro manager, and why is that so much better than being a micromanager? Don't they both kind of mean the same thing? No. A macro manager is concerned with the big picture and accomplishing the larger end goal, not getting lost in the minutia of how that goal is met. Macro managers value accountability more than control. If you want to be a good macro manager, you're going to give your employee the power to stretch out and be personally responsible for the wins, and yes, even sometimes the losses that may occur in a project. But wait a minute, Jeremy. What if I know my employee's going to make a mistake because they're approaching the project in not the best way, the way that I would do it? Shouldn't I just step in and tell them how to get it done so they don't make mistakes, so it doesn't take time, so it doesn't perhaps cost me a point in profitability? I mean, mistakes cost money. Why in the world would I encourage or let an employee make a mistake? That's absolutely ridiculous. You know, there's a fine balancing act between coaching an employee in best practices to improve and giving them power to make their own decisions and accept the consequences if they fail at a task. If you clearly set the vision and objectives, but hold back dictating how the team or employee should accomplish the goal, you're empowering your staff to determine the best approach. As a manager, you have to have a certain level of trust that an employee can do their job to the standards you've set. But micromanagers, you're never going to let them succeed on their own or fail, setting the stage for you to teach them. Rather, you're just going to make them do it your way. And in some ways, that stifles innovation because, yes, you may have a good way to do it, but face the facts, my friends, there are more usually than one way to get something accomplished. And oftentimes, we may learn a better way. That's what is called innovation. While a failure is certainly not what we want from our staff when we give them a project, and at times it can be disruptive and even cost us financially, you're going to find that a well-managed employee who isn't always under a microscope all the time is going to be able to use their noggin and think. And they're going to use any failure or mistake they may make in a project or a task as a learning platform so that they don't do it again. If, as a manager, you learn to acknowledge an employee's effort, that they put forth the effort and tried, even if they didn't accomplish the end result we wanted, we appreciated their effort, and that employee, trust me, is going to much more likely take the failure seriously, take it as a learning experience, and avoid trying to make the same mistake again. After all, you did acknowledge that I tried. That means a lot to me as an employee, but man, I didn't do it right. I didn't get the results we want. You may find when you do this as a macro manager that instead of you having to tell your employee how to do something, get this, novel concept, when you let an employee try and fail, you're going to find that employee may ask you how to do it better in the future. Why? No one likes to fail, especially a second time, and very few employees like to let the boss down, especially if they want to keep their job. Letting employees try and possibly fail the first time. If you have micromanaged your employees to ensure no errors were made, there's less chance for the employee to learn how to do it, to innovate, and the only thing we can do is hope they follow our direction. And in the future, we're just going to have to monitor them closely because the employee is not doing it in a way that may be natural for them. I remember a situation in a company that I was in where an employee had a specific way of doing something, and the owner would throw their hands up and go, "That's not the way it should be done." But yet, the end result was the same. It just so happened the way the owner wanted the work done was not conducive to the way the employee thought and the way the employee worked. But as long as the end goal was reached, as long as the milestones were met, does it really matter if your employee hammers with the left hand or the right hand? Just because you hammer with the right doesn't mean you have to make them do the same thing. And that may be a wild analogy, but I think you get the point. One of the things about employees accomplishing a job that as a manager we need to remember is, yes, you may feel that due to your experience and leadership position, our way is the best way. But again, sometimes we forget there's usually more than one way to accomplish something, and it's all about end results. I want you to understand and don't mistake what I'm saying. I'm not telling you to always give your employees free rein to decide how to accomplish everything and anything, and in certain situations, you're going to find your way may be the only way. But a true macro manager will still allow some autonomy in allowing employees to take their own path wherever possible, as long as the end result meets expectations. And if an employee fails, remember, don't chastise them for failing. Don't berate them, because that just raises people's hackles. Tactfully point out how you would have approached it and ask them if they see where they had a problem. Where did you fail? Where could you refine the process to get to the results we want? Can I offer a suggestion? Approaching it that way, you're going to find your employees are much more open to hearing how you would do it and perhaps adopting your approach or melding it into their own so that the end goal is met. A macro manager cares more about the broad metrics that indicate continual improvement and progress towards a goal rather than obsessing over the daily activities and minutiae. So to put this in another way, a macro manager looks at leading indicators rather than lagging ones. They recognize that if they clearly communicate the context and purpose of the company's direction, of the project's direction, the team can better understand how their work aligns with the organization's priorities. This guides decision-making at the employee's level. A macro manager tries to give their staff extra autonomy and that room to innovate within the broader framework whenever it's feasible. Now, you always can't do that. Again, I want to stress this. There are times you're going to have to tell an employee exactly how you want it done. But ask yourself before you do that, is there any possible autonomy I can give my employee? What would be the worst case scenario if I let my employee try this on their own? Can I give the broad picture? Can I give them a rough idea of how to accomplish it and tell them you need to work out the small details? When you can do that, when you can ask yourself those questions and honestly answer them and give away that control to your employee, you're going to find your employees will perform better and morale will improve. Macromanagers offer coaching and support, not ironclad directives. And they certainly don't try to manage every detail of how an employee gets their job done. A macromanager will also model the leadership behavior that they want to see in their managers under them. If you micromanage your managers, your lower level leaders, guess what? They're going to do the same thing. And you're going to have an entire organization of people looking over someone else's shoulders. This doesn't mean you can't hold your staff accountable for their performance, but try to value accountability more than controlling how they get to the end results. Then employees have both the responsibility for the outcome and authority for the work they do, which helps build that pride and ownership I've already talked about. Pride and ownership of a project, pride in completing a project correctly, is one of the most powerful fuels to building good morale. Employees who aren't micromanaged are usually more productive and less stressed at their job, which increases project outcomes and company morale overall, and reduces absenteeism. You know, when you have somebody always leaning over your shoulder, how do you feel? It's stressful. And the last thing we need to do in the stress-filled world of home service solutions is add another layer of stress to our employees. As a macro manager, begin to think big picture. Worry about setting up your teams for success and then get out of the way. Don't worry about the hands-on, minute-to-minute oversight. Empower, teach, train. Yes, I know this. You're going to have some employees who are going to goof it up big time. But you should have enough knowledge of the employee to determine the level of autonomy you can give them. In other words, not every employee in the company can have the same level of autonomy. But the goal is to take employees that you give less autonomy to and teach them ways to think for themselves so you can grant them more autonomy. You want to commit to build in your employee a thought process where they think for themselves and they concentrate on the big picture and the project goal that you've dictated for them. Becoming this type of leader takes effort and time. It requires you trust your staff. And that takes commitment and some time to build, because there are a lot of cases where we don't yet have the staff that we really can trust. So you have to start on it early by working with your new hires. You have to learn to hire right. And part of that process is understanding things like using DISC profiles. We have a podcast out on that. Getting an employee indoctrinated early in their employment with the company culture, with building morale, with thinking big picture, not micromanaging. Let accountability, not micromanaging, be your mantra. There's another benefit from not controlling every way that an employee does their job, or just stepping in and saying, here, let me do that, so that we get it done, or we can get it done fast. When you give an employee autonomy and you hold them accountable for success and accepting that there might be failures, the innovation you drive is oftentimes out-of-the-box thinking. An employee who has the ultimate responsibility for getting the project right, in other words, the burden's on their shoulders, will try to think of new ways, more efficient ways to do their job, rather than reverting back to the way they've always done it. Because, listen, if they can get the project done quicker, more efficiently, better, makes them look better, makes the boss happier. And this is a benefit you don't see in companies that dictate every little thing an employee does in completing a task. Innovation usually drives new efficiencies. And in some cases, innovation also drives new business opportunities. So progressive companies are always looking at ways to drive out-of-the-box thinking and innovation, and what better way to do that than stop being a micromanager and become a macro manager. Now, when I talk about not telling an employee step-by-step how to do something, have established processes and procedures. Processes that explain how something should be done step by step are a necessary building block of efficiently accomplishing a task. However, when we hand an employee a process, We should also point out that if there is a way that is more natural for them to accomplish the end result, and the end result meets our criteria for the quality and the standards, we encourage them to do that. And please point it out so that we can add it as an alternative method to that process that we've created. I hope in our discussion that honestly I've helped you understand that when you always tell an employee how to do every little aspect of their job, and you're always leering over their shoulder all the time to make sure your instructions are being followed, it's not the best way to manage your staff, and certainly not the way to grow your organization without an enormous amount of stress and workload on your shoulders. In fact, in almost every case, it's the least productive way to manage your employees. When an employee feels the boss is always staring over their shoulder, it creates friction and tension. And I'm reminded of an expression that employees don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. It is a statistical fact that many employees leaving a job indicate that one of the top reasons they left is either a manager and their style or a lack of autonomy in doing their job. You should be concentrating on the big picture. Complete projects efficiently and strive to have a zero defect mentality. If you don't know what a zero defect mentality is or what the dirt foot principle is, take one of our upcoming classes at Service Nation on quality in action, on managing by better quality. Here's the point. After you show an employee how they do their job, give them the ability to execute and perhaps find a better way for themselves to accomplish the end goal, and simply hold them accountable for results. I know at times mistakes are going to be made, but look at them as a learning and training opportunity, because not micromanaging your employees is the hallmark of a good leader, and it's a leadership trait we have to develop. Plus, hey, listen, an added benefit to this management style is by not always having to hover over everybody and spend time explaining how to do something exactly your way, you can work on your business instead of in your business. You can concentrate on the big picture, and you're going to get more time that way to manage the financial aspect of your business, the marketing side of your business, secure new business opportunities, rather than waste it by having to get continual hourly or daily updates on something or having to micromanage your employees. If you're interested in other ways to become a better leader and hone or expand your leadership skills, I encourage you to visit servicenation.com and explore the leadership classes available, including John Maxwell Certified Leadership Programs and Zero Defect Quality Implementation and Management Training. I can guarantee you the investment in this type of training will pay you back tenfold. Leadership rarely comes naturally for all people. So listen, until next time, this is Jeremy with Service Fusion and Service Fusion's Business Academy. And as always, I encourage you to look at our award-winning workflow management software, Service Fusion, designed to make your company easier to manage and help your profits grow by using software that works the way you work instead of the way the software company tells you it should work. Used by over 8,000 companies today, come see why Service Fusion is always making waves in the software industry. And again, I encourage you definitely to visit Service Nation's website at servicenation.com. Even if you're not interested in leadership training and learning more about the best practices in the industry, I don't know why you wouldn't do that, but if you're not, you can still leverage over $1 billion in purchasing power to give you discounts and rebates on the things you use every day anyway. And you can also leverage then the training that's available in all aspects of running a profitable business, from your accounting all the way to your CSRs and your service techs, all geared not only to build a profitable business, but help you build more net worth in your company. So please stay tuned for our next podcast. And listen, if you like this podcast, Tips for the Trades, please tell your friends and encourage them to listen along. And as always, feel free to send me any comments or suggestions. Now go out there and build something great. Remember, this is your trade, your business, and your legacy, so make it count. Keep in mind, in the trades, every small improvement adds up to big results. So keep making small improvements. And until next time, keep your businesses growing, keep them efficient, keep them profitable, and keep making your business the best it can be. This is your Tips for the Trades, signing off.